Welcome! It's the 4th of April, the day after the general elections in Hungary, with yet another major victory for Viktor Orbán and his party, Fidesz. It's the perfect occasion to upload a video on the subject and explain why Hungary's famous prime minister keeps winning. This year's parliamentary election brought yet another supermajority for Fidesz, their fourth major victory in a row. The party in power essentially won everywhere in the country, except for Budapest and two larger cities, Pécs and Szeged, where the opposition gained some seats. The capital remained left-leaning, even traditionally right-wing districts were lost, but in the end, Fidesz won 135 seats in parliament, while the united opposition got only 56, and the ultra-right-wing party Mi Hazánk was third with 7 seats, which is a significant win for them. Orbán has been in power since 2010. Every time his party wins, we see the same reports in mainstream media. They use terms like pro-Russia, pro-Putin, authoritarian, nationalist, far-right, etc. Of course, such reports are just part of the never-ending political game, so we should not take them too seriously. The real question is, why a single party can keep winning national elections? What makes this possible? It is not the result of suppression of free speech or significant electoral fraud. The truth is that in the last 30 years, Orbán was the only political actor who was both willing and able to build a power base and then expand it. He originally learned this from the left in the 1990s, but his opponents either relied on existing structures that they themselves gradually consumed and destroyed, or they created small niche parties that were doomed to fail. Back in 2002, when Fidesz lost the election and fell out of power, a coalition of socialists and liberals formed a new government, returning after a 4-year hiatus. Left-leaning newspapers criticized Orbán for being absent from parliament, but almost immediately he started rebuilding and strengthening his own party, which would take years. He declared that the nation could not be in opposition. He encouraged the foundation of small circles and groups, which would serve as the foundation of an even larger political force. Soon, more than 11,000 such circles were registered. The emphasis was on patriotism, anti-communism, and a feeling of community, trying to rise above mere political discourse. In only 2 years, the new government mismanaged the economy, spending more than it could finance with taxes and loans. Municipal elections were won by Fidesz in 2004, so to prevent further losses, the leader of the Socialist Party, Péter Medgyessy, was replaced with Ferenc Gyurcsány, who announced plan after plan regarding rapid economic development, European integration, and a much higher standard of living. These remained only plans, but the true state of the economy was concealed with further spending. By 2006, Hungary was in dire straits, but with falsified GDP data and more promises, the coalition government stayed in power, although by then, Fidesz became a single, monolithic bloc of conservative forces. Not long after the election, Prime Minister Gyurcsány privately admitted that they lied day and night just to win, and now harsh measures were needed to fix the economy. Street protests broke out, the situation remained tenuous for months, the socialists lost popular support, while Orbán and Fidesz leaned back and watched as the left destroyed itself. Gyurcsány refused to resign. He still believed that he was Orbán's only worthy opponent, the strongman of the left, the only one that could mobilize the masses. This was not the case anymore, especially when the financial crisis hit in 2008. With no reserves and an already weak economy, Hungary had to ask for an IMF loan to avoid bankruptcy, implementing austerity measures at the same time. In December 2009, Ferenc Gyurcsány was finally convinced to step down, but by then it was too late. The next spring, Fidesz won 53% of the votes, gaining a 67% supermajority in parliament, which allowed them to change the constitution. For the first time, almost the entire country showed the color of orange, and to achieve that, Orbán simply had to wait and watch as the left lost all credibility. The new Fidesz government planned to fix the economy with deficit spending, but after a brief visit to Berlin, during which German Chancellor Angela Merkel categorically refused this option, more austerity measures followed, packaged and marketed in a way that made them look less harsh. A new constitution came into force by early 2012, along with a new electoral law which halved the number of MPs and prescribed a single round for subsequent elections. Fidesz was accused of cooperation with the far right, but in reality, Orbán was managing and channeling anti-Semitic and ultra-right-wing sentiments that had existed in Hungary and other European countries for centuries in a way that allowed him to use their less extreme supporters while gradually making them irrelevant. In the meantime, leftist parties continued to shrink as their leaders were incompetent and uncharismatic. They were unwilling and/or unable to follow Orbán's example and build from the bottom, listen to the people, adjust their agendas, and gradually establish larger, stronger bases. Instead, older parties like the Democratic Forum and the Free Democrats disappeared, new ones emerged to represent the far right, Jobbik, and liberal intellectuals, LMP, or Politics Can Be Different. The Socialist Party continued to lose support, and a new challenger emerged, the Democratic Coalition, led by none other than Ferenc Gyurcsány, who was still dreaming of his glorious return to power, gaining the support of disillusioned ex-socialists and others who found a common platform in hating Orbán with passion. The economy gradually stabilized, spending could now be increased, as austerity was replaced with easing. Changes at the central bank allowed the lowering of key interest rates, boosting lending and helping businesses, along with households. The incredibly harmful practice of foreign exchange mortgages was discontinued, although the solution sparked another public debate. But in the end, the opposition's impotence and lack of vision guaranteed another win in the 2014 election. The supermajority was preserved, thanks partly to the new electoral law that gave more seats to the largest party, boosting its results, although victory was ensured even without that. 2015 was the start of the migration crisis, with hundreds of thousands of newcomers entering Europe, mostly through Turkey and the Balkans, but also Libya and the Mediterranean. Hungary was along the Balkan route, but after brief hesitation, Orbán decided to close the border and build a fence to prevent the illegal entry of so-called refugees, who traveled through several safe countries to reach the richest European nations, mainly Germany and Norway. The initial international outrage and political attacks eventually quieted down as more European countries adopted similar measures, and by 2018, the topic of mass migration was only used in preparation for the next election. By that time, the economy fully recovered, unemployment was below 4%, while GDP growth reached new highs. Along with real estate prices, thanks to the loose monetary policy that followed the American example. The 2018 election did not bring major changes. Fidesz kept its 133 seats, along with the 67% supermajority, while the opposition remained almost insignificant, although the largest opposition party was now Jobbik, which tried to shed its far-right past and became a liberal party. The socialists lost more ground, while the presence of Gyurcsány and his party, DK, was still a threat to them. A good example of the ridiculous nature of opposition parties was the performance and position of Együtt, Together, which, after infighting and several changes, refused to work with anyone, so their true name should have been Alone. The next few years were dominated by Fidesz and its lawmaking process. The government did a relatively good job during the COVID-19 pandemic, while international criticism regarding the dismantling of democratic institutions and the suppression of free speech increased. In the end, these claims did not change the situation. The opposition remained weak. In preparation for the 2022 election, all opposition parties signed a new agreement to create a joint list and work together. This allowed them to gain control of Budapest and several major cities in the 2019 local elections, although their primary in 2021 to select their candidate for prime minister was overshadowed by the machinations of Ferenc Gyurcsány. Since he was a divisive and unpopular character, his wife ran instead against Péter Márki-Zay, an independent with no political party of his own. In the end, Márki-Zay won. His job was to convince the voters that a serious rival against Orbán has now emerged. Unfortunately for him, he made several blunders in the next 6 months leading up to the election, among them sexist and racist comments, mistakes regarding his location, and the names of political actors like the President of Ukraine. These remarks, along with the ever-present intrigue by Gyurcsány, who remains an easy target for Fidesz and Orbán, turned away many of their supporters, making the next defeat inevitable. Most polls showed a comfortable Fidesz lead. Their victory was never seriously in question. Still, the opposition maintained its rhetoric, blaming Orbán for everything and calling his supporters idiots, half-wits, alcoholics, etc. Their main problem was still the same. They lacked a vision, ideas regarding the country's future. Their only common agenda was the hatred of Orbán, which is obviously not appealing enough to gain the support of the majority. As long as this doesn't change, Fidesz remains in power. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.